So let's start.
Hi guys, good evening everyone. Thanks for dropping by for our free masterclass, the Essential PhD Starter Kit and Insider View. So let's get started.
Yeah, we just have half an hour, so let's start with introductions. I'm Katia Motinho, and I always loved biology, so I start doing my degree in biology in Azores. This is an island in Portugal. After I start working in the lab as a research associate in Oporto, and I love to do wet lab, to do experiments, but I didn't want to go straight away for a PhD. So what I did was a master. I was master student. I did a master in molecular biology and oncology. And after my master, I also didn't want to do a PhD. So I looked for other option, and I went to Spain. In Spain, I started in Madrid as a lab technician, and I was there for 2 years studying epigenetics, and I really liked it. So my boss back then, he moved to Barcelona, and I went with him and with his lab. My group was there, so I started there a PhD, but I was still a lab technician, meaning I was my job was lab technician, and in part-time I was doing my PhD. In that lab I also did my first postdoc, but after 10 years studying cancer epigenetics, I decided to change completely research field. So I start my second postdoc in single cell technology, and after Barcelona I moved to Sydney as a group leader. So I was in Sydney, Australia. I was leading my team. We were doing all kind of single cell experiments in the lab, and after 1 year of being there at Garvan Institute, I was promoted to associate director while I was still being a group leader. Since last September, I returned to Portugal. I'm in Oporto, and I'm doing scientific consulting in the single cell technology research area. And at the same time, I'm co-founder of Advice for Life Scientists together with Osama.
Yeah, and Osama, that's me. So I did actually my undergraduate studies, pharmaceutical sciences. So I'm a pharmacist by training, and I worked as one for a couple of years before deciding to quit my job as a pharmacist in order to pursue a career as a scientist, because I had a lot of motivation and passion about neuroscience. So I did my master's in the States about neuroscience, and then I did a PhD in Switzerland in the same topic, and then a short postdoc there in Switzerland. And then after that I moved to Sydney, where I became a senior scientist and a team leader for the learning and memory team in University of Technology Sydney. And after spending almost 2 years in Australia and more than 15 years in the lab, and me and Katia, we have more than 30 years of experience being in the lab as scientists, dealing with a lot of students and a lot of scientists at different levels of their careers. We decided that there are a lot of information out there that us and others struggled in order to reach these kind of information, and we decided to launch this platform, Advice for Life Scientists, in order to really provide this information for different scientists at different levels of their careers.
Yeah. So our goal today with this masterclass is to tell you the topics that we'll cover. We will tell you what we would like to know, okay, before we started the PhD, or even when we were during the first phase of our PhD. So this is not only our opinion, not only our experience, but it's also from our students. So all over our professional career, we had PhD students. This was also their feedback, and also from our colleagues, other researchers, other scientists. So we want to share these tips, all this kind of advice that we hope it will help you. Okay, and the first thing that you need to think, if you didn't start yet the PhD, or if you are already doing it in the very recently, is why do you want to do a PhD, okay, and what do you want from it? So when I was, as I mentioned, when I was doing first as research associate and after my master when I finished, I thought about this. Why do I want to do a PhD? And back then I didn't want. Why? First because I was studying genetics and I like it, but it was not my passion. Besides, all the PhD students back then, like my colleagues that were doing a PhD, they were unfortunately miserable, and I didn't want that. So I moved to Spain and I was lab technician during 2 years until I was comfortable in the lab. I knew different techniques. I liked epigenetics. I really love it. I still do now. Also single cell, but epigenetics. So it was when I felt comfortable and really this is what I want to do that I decided to do a PhD. And this is essential because it's like a marathon, and in the long way you need a lot of motivation because it's hard. It's not easy to do a PhD. No, I will be lying to you if I tell that it will be easy. No, but so if you have this motivation there, that is something that you really like it, you will continue. You continue to it. And also the purpose of your PhD, why you want to do a PhD, what do you want to get when you finish your PhD is also really important.
Yeah, exactly. You need to really keep in mind what you want from it, meaning that if your goal is the normal pathway where you would like to be a scientist and then after that you become a group leader and a professor, or whether in research or academia, this would be the path to go. But if you would like to work in industry or even in a completely different field, then doing a PhD is not necessarily something that you need to do, and there will be an alternative pathway that you can take instead of doing a PhD. So this is very important. Point one is what is your motivation and why you want to do your PhD, right? And then the second point, and it's very important as well, is to discuss the necessary skills that you'd better have. Of course, it would be advantageous if you have these skills, or you need to be aware that you will need these skills throughout the degree itself or throughout the years that we will be spending in the lab. And the first one that we will cover is the amount of reading that you are doing. I myself, for example, before doing my PhD, I know that we need to read and everything, but I didn't know that this amount of reading is humongous. So you do an awful amount of reading during your PhD years. It is expected, of course, because you need to catch up with the literature. You need to get inspiration from what's out there in the literature already, from what other people did in the field, in order to come up with questions, and then you design your experiments, and then you move on. But then the idea is not the amount as well, but how to tackle and how to read efficiently the literature. I remember vividly the first time I read a research article, it took me more than a week really to decipher everything I was reading word by word, which is not the most efficient way. Later on, with experience, you will learn that there is another way to tackle a research article and why you are reading this article. Is it for a method, for example, that you are looking for? Then you just go to the section itself to skim through the details and to see how they did it exactly, or what exactly the proper way to efficiently tackle a specific literature out there.
Yeah. Other skill that you have to have is time management. You need to know how to manage your time. So first thing, get an agenda or use Google Calendar, and in this agenda put all the tasks that you have to do, all the meetings. Put also your personal life, meaning put like dinners. It's really important to keep a balance between your personal and social life and also professional life, because you will have 24/7, so you will have work to be in the lab 24/7. That it's like that, but we cannot be 24 hours, including weekends, in the lab, because we need to rest, we need to disconnect. So it's really important in your agenda, okay, digital or in paper, for you to put times for rest, to go to the gym, to go shopping, all these kind of things. But also, of course, experiments and professional things that you need to do. And one of the things that it helped me is each day in the morning, or if you want at night, the day before at night, you have to think what are the tasks that are really essential, that are really important for you to do, okay? And this will be 1 or 2 tasks per day. So, and focus on that tasks. This is really important, and of course is related with organization. You need to be organized, and this is other skill that you need to have.
Yeah, exactly. It goes hand in hand with time management. You need to be to develop organizational skills, specifically with keeping the records of all the experiments that you are performing in the lab, all the experiments that you will perform in the lab, all the experiments that you already did in the lab. Like this, you will have easy access to the results whenever you need them, or your supervisor needs them, or anything. And the second thing also, in terms of organization, the importance of keeping annotated bibliography. So you will read a lot about the field of your PhD, and sometimes I read this somewhere before, but then you might waste a lot of time in order to really return back to where you read a specific type of information. So the idea is to be organized properly, to have folders and subfolders where you have literature reviews and research articles according to topics and stuff like that. So you need to be really well organized as well for this matter, which is all the literature that you are reading. And the next point would be, after being organized, is that you will need to communicate your results by writing, for example, or not only communicate your result, but even writing a proposal about your project or something. So you need to be aware that you will do a lot of writing. So this is also another phase of the PhD, that you need to do a lot of writing, and you need to understand that there are different types of documents that you are required to write throughout your PhD. There is a proposal, for example. You are proposing your project before starting even, and during your PhD, for example, you would need to write an annual report, maybe to the university or to the department. Sometimes after you finish your project, or while you are wrapping up your project, you need to start the manuscript for a research paper that you will submit, or even your thesis. So every single document has a specific format. They have different sections, and you need to learn how to really tackle writing these different formats.
Yeah. Also, together with writing, you will need to do always figures. You need to know how to do scientific illustration. And I remember the first time that my boss asked me to do a figure, I thought, how? I'm not a designer, right? So I used back then PowerPoint. That now I'm not using PowerPoint, but is an option. It was very easy. And yeah, try to see different applications, websites to learn how to work with those programs, because they will be very, very useful for you to do figures for papers or for presentations, because public speaking is also a skill that you need to have. This is also something that I learned in the bad way, okay? And for a while, it was difficult for me to do public speaking. You will need to do it. You need to communicate your results for strangers, okay, in meetings or in conferences, but even for the members of your team. So communication is really, really important. It's also an essential skill, because you will need to communicate with your colleagues. You need to communicate with people that you don't know, as I said. You will need to argue why you did an experiment in the way and not in the other. People will tell you that your results are not good. Why did you do that? And you need to tell them no and what you are thinking. So yeah, always be polite, okay? We can say no, but if we need to say no and explain why we are saying no. So don't assume that people knows what you are thinking. Never. And also something very, very important in communication is the way you communicate with your supervisor, because you need to have a clear communication with your supervisor for the things to go very, very well. And this is something really important, so important that we have a specific section that is called supervision.
Yeah, exactly. You need to be aware that there are different models for supervision. So sometimes you might have only one person as a supervisor. It could be the group leader, the head of the lab, the principal investigator, and it could be actually not only one person, it could be 1+1. So this other person could be within the lab itself, either a senior scientist or a postdoc that is assigned in order to be with you, helping you throughout your PhD. Or it could be another 1+1, another person from another lab, like for example, the lab head of your current lab, and then a collaboration with another lab, right? Or even more than 2 professors from externally, if the project is bigger and there are many labs are involved in it. Irrespective of that, you will need to know as a PhD student what are your duties towards your supervisor, how regular you meet with them and report and give a progress report and stuff like that to your supervisor, and what are the duties of the supervisor towards you. This is also very important. It's like the terms and conditions, between both parties. So you really need to know and be clear with these kind of things.
And how can you find this? How can you know this? So normally in the interviews that you will do, there are kind of 2 phases. The first one is where you meet for the first time with a PI or someone that is doing the interview, and then they ask you always at the end, do you have any questions? There you can ask what is the expected way of supervision that you will have, so you can have an idea. You can ask for that. You can ask if the PI, if it's a PI that is doing the interview, it will be him directly supervising you. What is he expecting from you? This is also really important. So this is questions that you can do. And in the second phase, where normally you visit the lab, or of course now with COVID, I don't know if it will be possible, but if you have to meet the team, right, your future colleagues, and to them you can ask what kind of supervision they have, how many times they meet with the PI, for example, or with their supervisor, if they do for example, social events to see the environment, if it's good, if it's okay to take some time off. So all these questions you will have good or bad vibes, okay? If you have bad vibes, even if it's a lab that publishes sciences and natures, just follow your heart and don't go. Choose other options, see other options, because what you need to see is if you are compatible with that lab, because this is really important, okay, for you to keep your mental health, because as we said, doing a PhD, it's tough. And in my case, I don't know yours, but in my case, what really helped me, and when I look back, what I take from that lab was my friends, all the people that was in the lab. It was amazing, and that was what made my PhD successful. So yeah, besides that, communication with the supervisor, as I said, is super important, okay? So how can you see that? You can ask to ex-members of the lab, okay, because normally these people tend to say the truth because they are no longer in the lab. To ask them, contact them through LinkedIn, for example, and ask them how was the environment, how was the PI, the way it was. So like this, you can have a better idea of what is happening. And if it convinces you, okay, go. If it convinces you, you go, and then after 1 year you see that it's not good, you just change, okay? Yeah. So
the next point
yes.
would be that I was not aware of back in the day, is that I thought that a PhD is basically flat, all the years are similar, but apparently there are phases of a PhD. And the first phase actually is the orientation or the induction phase.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, this phase is where you will be completely lost. So, let's say 1 year, more or less.
It depends on the field. It could be more than that, or it could be less than that. In my case, for example, it was almost 2 years, like a year and a half at least.
Okay. In my case, I will say that it was like 1 year. I was completely lost. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know why people were asking me things, because no, I don't know anything. So yeah, you need to learn where are the things, the reagents, the fridge, the coffee shop. I don't know, all these kind of things. Plus, it's a new area of research, so you need to read a lot. And here, the advices are: ask all the questions. Don't think there are silly questions. I still, until the moment, I always say, people that work with me, there are no silly questions. It's the way to learn. So do all the questions that you like, because it's not supposed for you when you are starting the PhD to be an expert. Also ask for papers that are really key in your field. And the first part in this phase, I will say, read, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in this phase as well, probably people will not leave you alone in the lab, right? So a postdoc or a senior PhD student will be shadowing you in order to make sure that you are doing the right experiments. And once you master your game and you become kind of independent, so the second phase starts, which is the research intensive part. You spend the majority of your time doing your experiments independently, probably, and you will start having some results. And this starts after the kind of orientation phase, maybe at the end of the second year, and then the third year, and then maybe you will spend a couple of years doing research where you do the meat of your project, right? And after that, getting the results, you'll get to the exposure phase where you almost done of the majority of your experiments and the majority of your project, and you have some results that you need to communicate to the society, to the community, to the research field itself. And you would need to do posters, for example, or talks in conferences, or even write your research paper, or write even your thesis. So this would be the exposure phase where you already finished the majority of the experimental part, and you start on the writing and communicating these results to others in a written format for submissions, or even orally for like in conferences.
So yeah, here in this phase, I will say that is where you see the light, because until there, it's like the feeling is, I don't have anything to present, I don't have anything to write my PhD thesis, what will I do? So yeah, here is when you start seeing the light and everything starts making sense. So yeah. So now the question is how to be prepared, how to be ready to all of this. To, as I said, a PhD is like a marathon. You need to be prepared. So the first thing is to be aware of what you need. Like this masterclass is already an idea what you will need, what will be the challenges. So yeah, the other thing that you can do is to start getting all these skills, okay, developing these skills that we talk about during this masterclass. You can do some courses, formation. So start trying to see what are the skills that you are not so good and you need to develop. Then there will be a lot of frustration. Okay, we don't want to to demotivate you. It's not that, but we just want for you to be aware, because like this you will not be so disappointed.
Sorry for spoiling the surprise. Well, yeah, there will be lots of frustrations there.
Yeah, this is science. It's like if we knew what is happening, yeah, we will not do science. So science is about trying experiments that will fail, negative results, and your PhD will be like that. So yeah. And so yeah, frustration. You need to start managing and handle frustration. What worked for us was we try to keep always kind of healthy diet, batch cooking. Well, I eat a lot of sweets, but so try to yes, sweets and sugar.
You feel
yeah,
sad.
Yes. So try to keep your health, your good health, going to the gym, doing exercise, sports. As I mentioned also before, social life, events, dinners, take care of you. During the PhD and also as a scientist, life is not only work. You need to have a social life and a personal life. It's really important. It's also really important for you to rest, because when we are so tired and we are repeating experiments, we are not thinking about what went wrong. We just do it and we are losing time, money, and it's not worth it. So rest, charge batteries, and yeah, what else? So
And
disconnect.
yeah, disconnecting mainly.
Yeah, basically disconnect.
So
Yeah.
just to summarize what we have been trying to give through this masterclass is basically we covered the topics of first, before starting a PhD, or even if you started just recently, what's your motivation, what's your passion about that, what do you want from a PhD? You need to answer these questions before really starting a PhD. And the second thing, what are the necessary skills that you probably will need during your PhD? And we mentioned like you will do a lot of reading, the proper and the most efficient way of reading. You need to learn how to write specific types of documents, and public speaking, doing figures, all these kind of skills. If you don't have them, you'd better really be aware that you need to work on them. And then the supervision, the models of supervision, the kind of duties of you towards your supervisor and the duties of the supervisor toward you, and how to find the proper supervisor. And yeah, you need to discuss this with the ex-lab members and stuff like that. And the phases of a PhD. So we know that PhD starts with the orientation and then research intensive phase, and then finally where you see the light, the exposure phase, where you are communicating your results, and then finally how to overcome frustrations, how to be ready for these, and how to disconnect and recharge your battery towards a healthy kind of a PhD trip.
Yeah.
That's it for this masterclass, and we didn't cover all the topics. We know that you probably will have some questions. We have our email, we have our social network handles here. Please shout out any question that you need. We will always be available, and we'll try to communicate with you in order to give you more information and more advice.
Yeah.
So stay tuned for the future masterclasses that we have, and hope that was useful, and see you soon.
See you.